Up next in the broadcast, Korea's central bank holds the benchmark rate steady for the 14th straight month, but the decision was not unanimous, according to the BOK governor. Meanwhile, it also cut the nation's growth outlook for the year. After no clear winner from June's local ballot, rival parties gear up for July's parliamentary by-elections. 15 seats in the National Assembly will be up for grabs. Beijing and Washington sat down for talks to look at the bigger picture, saying conflict would be disastrous. The two hash out issues of contention and agreement to build their long-term relationship. Primetime News begins now.
Hello, welcome to Primetime News. I'm Kang Tae-ri in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for tuning in. We start with the latest moves by the nation's central bank. As expected, the Bank of Korea held the key rate steady this month, but it did cut the growth outlook for the year.
That's right. The Bank of Korea cited the negative impact of the April ferry disaster on the country's already sluggish domestic demand, but it did also stress that we do remain on the road to recovery. Hwang Jie has the details.
The Bank of Korea expects the domestic economy to grow 3.8% this year, down 0.2 percentage points from its earlier forecast. It also cut its growth forecast for next year to 4% from 4.2%. Giving out a new growth outlook on Thursday, the central bank said the revision is due to sluggish domestic demand brought on by the ferry disaster in April. Although the new forecast indicates a slowdown in the pace of recovery, the bank said that it does not indicate a radical change in the bank's view that the overall domestic economy remains on a recovery track. But it did open up the possibility of a rate cut down the road.
This 3.8% growth is still matching up with the nation's potential growth rate. But the concern now is that there are bigger downside risks than upward potential.
The downside risk, the central bank says, is again coming largely from the ferry tragedy as well as the strengthening local currency trend.
We still can't rule out the possibility that the worsened economic sentiment due to the disaster will go on for a longer period of time.
The central bank has been under pressure for a rate cut as Finance Minister nominee Choi Kyung-hwan urged the bank to seek easier monetary policies to spur growth. For this month, the central bank kept the key rate steady at 2.5% for the 14th straight month. While the central bank is taking a wait-and-see approach for the time being, some market analysts expect that a rate cut could come as early as next month. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
With only 3 weeks left until crucial by-elections here in Korea, the country's two main political parties are gearing up for a rematch after no clear winner emerged in last month's local elections. 15 parliamentary seats will be up for grabs. Ji Myung-gil has more.
The race for the July 30th parliamentary by-elections got underway Thursday with 2 days of candidate registration at the National Election Commission. 15 assembly seats are up for grabs, the largest number in Korea's by-election history. Campaigning will officially start on July 17th and continue for 2 weeks until Election Day. For Korea's two main political parties, the by-elections will be far more than an opportunity to expand their presence in the National Assembly, as neither one emerged as a clear victor after local elections on June 4th. Currently, the ruling Saenuri Party holds 147 of the 300 parliamentary seats, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has 126. The ruling party is vying to gain a majority of the vacant assembly seats, while the main opposition party is looking to garner a win in important constituencies in Seoul and the surrounding Gyeonggi-do province. Seoul's Dongjak-bi district is considered strategically important to both parties, as the district's parliamentary seat is not only in the heart of Seoul, but is the former district of seven-term lawmaker and Saenuri heavyweight Chung Mong-jun. Experts say that as the 15 constituencies are spread around the nation, with 6 being in the metropolitan area, including 1 in Seoul, the mini general election could act as a referendum on the government. In appealing to voters, the Saenuri Party will emphasize the need for a national reform drive and supporting the president, while the Unified Opposition Party will continue to highlight government's mishandling of April's ferry tragedy. But unless the main opposition party can provide viable alternatives to the ruling party's policies, neither party will have a clear advantage. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Political gridlock in recent weeks has kept President Park Geun-hye's reform drive from gaining much traction. To grease the wheels, the president reached across the aisle this Thursday, meeting with the floor leadership of the ruling and opposition parties at the country's top office for the very first time. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
It was the first time President Park had invited the floor leadership from both the ruling and opposition parties to the presidential office. The president, who has been criticized for a lack of dialogue and cooperation with the opposition side, positively assessed the weekly meeting between the rival parties' floor leadership.
국민을 위한 상생에 국회로 이제 그 상을 잘 만들어가면 국민들께서도 크게 박수를 치시리라고 생각을 합니다.
A major development from Thursday's talks was an agreement to pass a bill designed to prevent a repeat of a tragedy like April's deadly ferry accident.
With an aim to pass the special legislation on the Sewol-ho ferry at the July 16th plenary session, the policy chiefs of the two parties will start negotiating the bill with the standing committees.
The rival parties need to narrow differences over the Sewol-ho Ferry Investigative Committee's authority and ways to compensate the victims and their families. President Park asked for bipartisan support behind her government and public sector reform-related bills put forth in the aftermath of the ferry disaster and a series of bills aimed at revitalizing the economy. A key part of the president's government restructuring plan involves setting up a safety ministry to oversee the management of all forms of natural and man-made disasters. The two parties in response said they'll seek to pass the bills next month. To the opposition's request that the president reconsider two controversial cabinet nominations, President Park said she would take it into consideration. The president asked the opposition to participate in her envisioned Inter-Korea Unification Preparatory Committee and said she hoped to meet both parties' floor leadership on a regular basis. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
2 days of high-level talks between the United States and China have come to a close, with both sides agreeing that North Korea's nuclear weapons program must be stopped. But they didn't see as eye-to-eye on cyber attack allegations that have put a sizable dent in Sino-American relations. Our Yu Lian tells us more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Washington and Beijing agree that curbing North Korea's nuclear weapons program is an urgent matter. In a press briefing after 2 days of talks Thursday, Kerry said both sides discussed specific ways to advance the goal of denuclearizing the North. Kerry and his Chinese counterparts also emphasized the importance of enforcing UN Security Council resolutions aimed at North Korea's weapons of mass destruction and its ballistic missile program. This, 1 day after North Korea fired 2 short-range missiles into the East Sea, demonstrating its capabilities. Kerry did, however, call on China to do more to rein in its neighboring ally and persuade them to give up their nuclear weapons. The U.S. indictment of 5 Chinese military officials for allegedly stealing trade secrets from American companies was also a topic of conversation. Kerry said that the loss of intellectual property through cyber hacking is having a chilling effect on U.S. innovation and investment, while Chinese Foreign Policy Chief Yang Jiechi described cybersecurity as a common threat facing all countries. Yang added that cyberspace should not be used as a tool for damaging the interests of other countries. Yu Lian, Arirang News.
North Korea has proposed working-level talks with South Korea to discuss its plans to send athletes and a cheering squad to the Incheon Asian Games this fall. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that they would like to hold the talks in the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom next Tuesday. North Korea said earlier this week it's sending a cheering squad to the upcoming Asian Games to be held in South Korea in an effort to improve inter-Korean relations. If a North Korean cheering squad were to participate in the Incheon Asian Games, it would be a first in 9 years. Korea's world-class internet and wireless network speeds didn't just happen by chance. Fierce competition in the telecom industry to meet the high demands of Korean customers has given rise to the rapid pace of development. And as our Connie Kim reports, it doesn't end there. This is just the beginning.
Using the world's fastest wireless network, Bang Mi-sun can download an hour-long online course on her smartphone in about 30 seconds.
Using the mobile IPTV, I stream movies and take online courses while I'm on public transportation. It's very convenient. I can download the videos quickly and watch them in high definition without ever getting disconnected.
Necessity may be the mother of invention, but competition doesn't hurt either. A fierce battle for network speed in Korea's telecom industry gave birth to the broadband LTE Advanced Network.
We found our customers wanting to download larger-sized videos. With the launch of the LTE-A service nationwide, we are now able to better meet those needs.
About half of all smartphone users have used their devices to download movies, and Kim says that the number is expected to reach about 70% within 4 years. The service is almost 3 times faster than the existing LTE networks and 15 times faster than the 3G services that have been available since 2006. But the speedy broadband LTE-A network won't be limited to smartphones.
The convergence of broadband LTE-A and other related industries, such as wearable devices and the Internet of Things, will gain momentum.
The smart car and smart building sectors, along with the big data industry, are other possible benefactors of the fast speeds that broadband LTE-A have to offer, not to mention its capacity to accommodate large amounts of information at lower costs. And the next upgrade on top of this broadband LTE-A is expected to be commercialized at the end of this year, and that means it's going to be quite costly for ordinary consumers to keep up with this trend, given that these smartphones don't come cheap. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
During this sweltering time of year, we're often faced with threats of energy blackouts, but thanks to a relatively milder summer and better energy planning by the government, we've been saved from energy crises.
Well, I don't know about milder summer today, but that makes looking at Korea's long-term energy plan a bit easier. And joining us for this conversation is Dr. Kim Hyun-gyu, Director of the Center for Energy Governance and Security at Hanyang University. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the Korean government is making efforts to diversify its oil import channels these days, and something that we talked about yesterday actually on this program. How oil import dependent is Korea?
Right. We have two changes. We have two big changes. One is the U.S. shale gas revolution, which has succeeded in producing a record amount of natural gas production from the United States, and they have enough of it so that they have to export it. And the biggest market for natural gas and oil is the Northeast Asian region, China, Korea, Japan. But the problem is they import the biggest amount of oil and gas, but they pay for high premium.
So is the cost and security of maintaining energy one of the big reasons why South Korea wants to turn itself into a regional energy hub?
Right. That's one of the emerging hot topics in this region. The reason behind why the issues of trading hub for both oil and gas is emerging is that a lot of oil and gas producers they're looking to this big market, Northeast Asia. So they want to ship more oil and gas to this region. So because of that, more volumes of oil and gas come and go. And they have found a need to establish some kind of facilities, like a storage systems here. That is oil trading hub. That facilitates so-called import and export. Why Korea? Compared to China and Japan, Korea is much better located in terms of deeper waters. Like compared to China, China has shallow waters and foggy weather. And Japan, as you know, Japan is highly disadvantaged geographically, disasters, earthquakes, and all these problems. Singapore is a good location, but Korea pushes to become the second trading hub for both oil and gas in the wider Asian region.
And at a recent forum on this topic, industry experts have been talking about this so-called super grid in Northeast Asia. What is this idea?
Wow, super grid.
How feasible is this, do you think? And what does South Korea get out of this?
We first produce electricity out of Mongolian desert. That's the idea of Japanese tycoon Son, right? He founded, research, institute that looks into these issues. So his idea is to generate electricity, wind power out of Mongolian deserts and ship it through a transnational grid system down to all the way from Mongolia through China, through North Korea, Korea, then undersea grid system all the way to Japan. So pan-Asian so-called electricity grid system. That's Asian supergrid. Europe has similar type of system, and we want to sort of copy that in this region.
All right. Well, Director Kim, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Thank you. Israeli airstrikes continue to bombard the Gaza Strip as the number of Palestinian deaths soars.
With more on that story, we now turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, Israel has now begun the third day of its offensive against Hamas, but it appears more civilians are getting caught in the crossfire.
That's right. At least 22 people were killed by Israeli aerial assaults on Gaza in the early morning hours of Thursday, 5 of which were Palestinian children. It marks the deadliest day since Israel launched Operation Protective Edge on Tuesday, bringing the overall death toll so far to 75. Israeli officials say the military has hit more than 750 targets inside Gaza over the past 48 hours and is warning that a ground operation could be imminent as more troops and tanks are deployed along the border. The militant group Hamas said it fired 8 rockets at Israel on Thursday, 2 of them at Tel Aviv. However, no casualties or injuries were reported. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is scheduled to brief the Security Council on the crisis later today. The UN chief condemned the rocket attacks against Israel and has urged both sides to show restraint. And heading now to Pakistan, a top military commander says security forces have seized more territory from the Taliban in the northeastern part of the country. Officials say the army took nearly 80% of the strategic city of Miran Shah, which they claim was a control center for all terrorist groups in the region. The Pakistani military is entering its 4th week in its mission to flush out the Taliban, following a series of terror attacks at an international airport last month. Commanders say more than 400 insurgents have been killed during the operation, but some remain skeptical that the campaign will bring about an end to Taliban attacks in the country. 24 soldiers were also lost and 19 injured during the fighting. However, the extent of civilian casualties remains unclear. And finally, a surge of violence has erupted in Brazil following the national team's biggest defeat at the World Cup in nearly a century, as disappointment quickly turned to anger. Protests, robberies, and vandalism were reported overnight in the country's largest city of Sao Paulo. Demonstrators torched dozens of buses in neighborhoods inside and out of the city, stopping short of widespread rioting. Police have ramped up security for the Brazilian team's next game on Saturday when they face off against the Netherlands in the 3rd-place match. Meanwhile, Korea's foreign ministry has issued an advisory for its citizens currently in Brazil, urging them to avoid large crowds and exercise caution. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Starting in Brazil, the World Cup finals are now set as Argentina took down the Netherlands in their semifinal matchup. Now let's jump into the recap. Despite a meeting of two of the top offensive teams in the tournament, it was the defenses that dictated the action for the 120 minutes of regulation and extra time. Argentina's Lionel Messi and the Netherlands' Arjen Robben were neutralized, leading to a combined 5 shots on goal for the match, 4 for the Argentinians and 1 for the Dutch. So it went to the penalty shootout where Argentina keeper Sergio Romero swatted away the first attempt by Ron Vlaar and another by Wesley Sneijder. Maxi Rodriguez, the fourth and final kicker for the Albi Celeste, converted to make it 4-2 for his side. And now Argentina heads to the finals against Germany, taking place at the famed Maracana in Rio on Sunday or early Monday morning here in Korea. Meanwhile, Brazil and the Netherlands meet a day earlier for the third-place match. And moving on, Hong Myung-bo resigned as the manager of the South Korea national football team on Thursday to take responsibility for his team's winless run at the World Cup.
My heart is heavy and broken. Before we left for the World Cup, we said we would bring hope to the people in Korea. Instead, our results just brought disappointment. For that, I sincerely apologize.
Well, it all started with an apology, but it ended with him stepping down from his post despite being given a vote of confidence a week earlier. Hong said that his 24-year run with the national team as a player, coach, and manager has come to an end for good after posting a record of 5 wins, 4 draws, and 10 losses as head coach. Vice President of the Korea Football Association, Heo Jung-moo, also tendered his resignation, saying he too deserved blame for South Korea's poor performance in Brazil. Meanwhile, the KFA said that it would find a new head coach as soon as possible, with the Asian Cup fast approaching in January. And leaving that there, let's get to Thursday's top KBO matchup between the Nexen Heroes and Hanwha Eagles. Then we fly to the first inning. It's the bottom of the frame. Kim Tae-gyun hits a 3-run shot to cap the 4-run inning for Hanwha. Then we go to the next inning. Nexen's Park Han-do fires his own long ball for 2 runs. It's 4-2. And we have Hanwha's Andrew Albers. He goes 6 solid innings with 5 strikeouts to show for it. Park Jung-jin gets the save, and Hanwha beats Nexen 4-2. And looking at the other scores, we have Kia taking down SK 7-5. Lotte beats Samsung 5-2. Meanwhile, Tusan leads 13-11 over LG in the bottom of the 9th inning. Well, that's all for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
Typhoon Noguri has moved out and scorching hot weather has moved in.
Yes, it did. We have Kim Bo-kyung to tell us more. I hear some regions soared to over, 36 degrees today?
Yes, the daytime high in Gwangju jumped to 36.4 degrees and Daegu to 35.9. Brace yourselves for another hot one as daytime highs in most parts of the country will remain above 30 degrees, not only for Friday, but for the foreseeable future. On Friday, UV levels are set to hit the very high range in most parts of the country, so make sure to apply that sunscreen before heading out. At the moment, we are seeing partly cloudy skies. However, the clouds weren't enough to keep out the heat as a heat wave warning has been issued for the central regions as well as Daegu. On to Friday's readings. Seoul and Daegu soared to 33 and 34, Gwangju and Busan to the low 30s. As for other regions, Daejeon and Myeongkimgang hit 32, while Jeju and Dokdo make it to the mid-20s. That's your weather for now, but I'll be back with more after midnight.
All right, thank you, Bo-kyung. And that wraps up this edition of Primetime News.
Thanks for watching and good night.